Okay, again, welcome. My name is Charles Hyman, and I'm with United Soccer Coaches Association. But it's a real pleasure for me to introduce Kelly and Mark Pulisic. We know their son, Christian, quite well. You're here to hear about Christian. And what better people to talk to about Christian than his parents? Why don't you give us a little bit of information about your soccer background and how that might have influenced Christian?
Well, I played, growing up, and professionally indoor for 8 years. I grew up with, my father was Croatian. He introduced the game to me at a young age, and I fell in love with it with my brothers and then continued to play and went on to college and fortunate enough to play some pro as well, and now I'm into the coaching, so it's been in my blood, and I'll let my wife tell her back.
Well, of course, I played as well. I wanted to be like my brother. There was no girls' team, so I had to plan a boys' team to start, but luckily, around 10, they finally had all girls' teams, so I was able to play. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, so then I continued my playing career at George Mason University, where I got to meet this guy. So there we go.
Was that in an indoor soccer game that you met him?
No, it was.
We met on the field.
On the fields, yeah.
On the fields at George Mason University.
That's a plug for co-ed soccer, I guess. But we all know the publicity that Christian's had and the success that he's had in the recent World Cup run, qualification games. But the things we don't know about is the childhood, how many children in the family, what his life was like. Why did he choose to go to Dortmund? So tell us about your family.
Yeah, we have 3 kids. Christian's the youngest, 19, 20, and 26-year-old. So we have a wonderful family. The kids are great, very supportive of each other, and obviously Christian's brother and sister are very proud of him and follow him. And it's pretty tight-knit, pretty tight and very close siblings.
And he's the youngest of the group?
He's the youngest, yes he is. His sister's 17 months older, so they're close in age.
You know, one of my advantages is that I have a grandson that went over to Europe at age 15 and played with Fulham. He's now with Premier League Bournemouth. And my son and his wife, I seen that's Emerson's their only child. And I seen the difficulties that they've gone through and the sacrifices that the parents make. But there was a certain age where we recognized Emerson's ability or special ability. Did you see the same thing with Christian? And what age would that have been?
I think with Christian, he was just, I'm a phys ed teacher, always into sports. My husband as well, coaching and playing. And we just knew when he was really young, he was just really gifted athletically. So it wasn't always a soccer ball, it was always something. He just was one of those kids that could do everything really well, really young. So we knew he was gifted athletically, but we didn't really make anything of it. We just let him play and enjoy all sorts of sports, and then he knew that we loved soccer and the game was always being played, so he kind of, loved that as well. So I don't know when we knew that it was going to be a soccer moment, but we knew we had a gifted athlete, but, we never really made too much of a big deal.
That those special moments come, sometimes we don't recognize them because it just becomes habit. And we live with someone that wants to be with the soccer ball more than anything else. Is that the way Christian was?
Yeah, it wasn't any different than all the kids now in the States, and soccer's so popular now, and parents are presenting a soccer ball now just as much as they did many years ago, a football or a baseball. So we did the same with him. We gave him different options. I was many hours throwing a baseball and a football with him, as much as soccer when he was very small, so just kind of gave him some options. And then as he started to play 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, he saw he was finding success, and he stuck with it and did more, played more soccer, and we were seeing his talents, and just, we weren't those parents saying he's going to be a pro. We just wanted him to enjoy what he wanted to do and express himself, with any sport.
There's always a contest between the mother and father, who got the genes. So who got the genes? Kelly, this is an opportunity for you to speak up.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take this one. Move over here. No, just teasing. I always just laugh because Christian always gets asked that, so he's really politically correct. So I think both of us came from athletic families, and I think all my brothers and sisters, Mark's brothers, I think we just had some athleticism. So hopefully, I think kind of Christian got the super gene between all the kids. So I think but he's.
I was always slow.
Christian does say I was the fast one, which I take claim because no one even knows I played soccer. So I always say he got the speed from me.
There's so much to born in a soccer family. Here you have two parents that are involved in soccer, played soccer, probably grew up with soccer. And so a lot of times the children grow up with soccer whether they want to or not. Because I would imagine, much like my house, your house, there's a soccer game on all the time, or there's a game or a tournament to go to. Is that the way it was around for Christian growing up?
Oh, yeah. I loved watching. He was, at that time, Real Madrid had the Galacticos, so he was a big Real Madrid fan, and then went to Man United, and, so I was always watching it, and obviously he would be around kicking a ball in the family room, and he'd come out and watch it with me, and so, yeah, there was always a game on, for sure.
One of the things that also happen is when you have a talented young player, let's say at 7, 8 years old, and he happens to be your son, everybody wants him on the team. Everybody would like to win, winning those trophies. And we're going to a tournament. We got a special event going on, and we can have a guest player. Yeah, I think we've all been there at some point, haven't we? What about you guys? Did you experience some of that?
Yeah, we did. Everyone would call and want him to guest play, when he was a youth. And I think one of the best decisions we made was not allowing that. We didn't really want him to play on more than one team because we didn't want structured soccer to be too much for him. We wanted him to train 2-3 days a week with his club team, play a game on the weekend. But then, he was so... he loved to play on his own. He wanted a lot of free play. He wanted to go out in the backyard and kick the ball around. So that was very, very important that he, had that time on his own to develop and not always in a structured environment.
That's really interesting, that statement, isn't it? Because we structure so much in our sport at a very young age that we kind of almost clone players into positions. I really like that, Mark. I think that's a very meaningful message that we can all hear. At what age did you, as parents, or was it Christian that said, "I want to play in Europe one day"?
Christian always wanted to play in Europe since he started watching, Real Madrid to Manchester United. So he always wanted to play in Europe. So that was his goal since probably 5. At about 14, I would say, when he started with the national team, we started to really consider, when it's right. And, we would sit down at the table. We call them family meetings because this was a major family decision because it wasn't just Christian. It was our other children, and we knew that it was going to be a big sacrifice. So at 14 is when we started to consider if he was ready. And he wasn't ready at 14, and we basically had to just kind of every 6 months have a conversation. And we also had to prepare other children. Hey, we're gonna probably be doing this, and one of us is gonna have to stay, one of us is gonna have to go, because you just can't tear a family and make your high school junior daughter jump to Germany or something. So But 14 is when we started to really start being a little more serious because Christian was much more serious. Do you want to add?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that was good. Yeah, I mean, there were times we would talk and I could get a sense he wasn't ready. You know, there were a lot of clubs that wanted him to go over at 13, 14, 15. And we could have pushed him, but when you're talking to your son, you get a feel and a sense, you know, if the time is right. So when Dortmund came along, you can sense that he was ready.
Did you have family talks? Did you sit down as a family and discuss these things? And how far in advance were you doing this?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, every couple of months, you know, we would get calls, and we'd always include everyone in on what was happening. So it was quite frequent.
And Kelly, what you said was after the under 14s, was this what really got him recognized, playing for the U.S. under 14 teams, under 16, under 17s? Is that where he was noticed in Europe?
Yeah, he was noticed in Europe. I mean, I think really with the U.S., the youth national team, and when he was playing in tournaments and things like that. So that's where he was recognized. But he had some opportunities to train with some clubs, you know, starting at 10. Go over for a couple days of training, and then, you know, check in on him, and then following 6 months or a year. So he had a couple good opportunities. But again, we just knew at 10, you know, that it wasn't the right time. It wasn't something that he was ready for. Playing-wise, sure. But there's so much more to the game than the physicality. It's the, you know, mentality of going and hearing a new language, or just moving away from half of your family.
Yeah, it's much more involved and much more complicated. But so, what clubs was he interested really going to and play? Because we all know he's with Dortmund, and he's with them since the academy. But were there other clubs also interested in getting him on a contract or trying to get him in the academy program?
Yeah, there were, and you know, we had to look at the right timing of it all and the right situation, and so, you know, it was kind of a perfect storm. His maturity, his age, everything was good at the time Dortmund came calling, and the comfort level when we went and visited, and how he felt, and how, you know, the first coach we met when we went on their training ground, you know, made us feel, you know, like we wanted to feel, you know, when you're going from you know, skipping over to another country. So everything kind of fit in at that moment. But there were other clubs interested. Yeah.
Now we're at the point where you as a family are making the decision that we're going to leave this comfort zone, our culture, and go into another very competitive environment where there's going to be some sacrifices and some struggles. The first struggle you may think of, as I did, might just be a language barrier. So there were a lot of things that you had to encounter and still keep the confidence and continue to grow as a player. So when you made your decision to go to Boardman, you as a family also made a decision that he was not going to go on his own, correct? How did you work that out?
Take it? Yeah. Well, it made sense. Being a school teacher, I had to work. Keeping my daughter home kind of worked, the mom with the daughter, and then our older son was already off at that point. He wasn't in the home. Dad being a coach and kind of the way it went, that was really best for us to, I guess for everybody, even though it was very, very challenging because there was just like lots of tears. I mean, my daughter Devin and Christian are 17 months apart, so they're as thick as thieves. So the two of them had to separate. They've always been a year apart in school. So there's a lot more dynamics that was going into this move. So we all, you know, had a say in how we felt, and we all felt that was the best for the family.
I was lucky, though, to be able to go over to Germany and be indulged in that stadium atmosphere, and so It was a struggle, of course, splitting the family up, but it was a great experience for me.
Being a soccer person, it was heaven, wasn't it?
Yeah,
It was a good
heaven.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every weekend, 83,000 people in a stadium.
Yeah, if you haven't been to a professional match in the Bundesliga, it is quite remarkable how the fans get into it, and you almost become a god for those 90 minutes. And it must have really been exciting.
Great.
So Dortmund wanted to sign Christian. Mm-hmm. Did he go on a trial, or did they just see him, and they did enough evaluations on him? How did that process go through?
No, they caught wind of him, scouting him when he was with the U16, 17 national team. There was a tournament in Turkey and Croatia where they were there. Dortmund scouts were there. And then they contacted myself and someone that we have representing Christian, and we decided that they were showing so much interest. They did so much homework on him and studied him so much. And, he didn't even go to the training ground. They offered a contract to him right away, just by seeing him in live and video. And so part of the deal was I had to go over with them. They had to take care of me as well. And fortunately, they wanted me there to be with him because he was so young, moving into a new country. And it was great. It just worked out.
Would you have let Christian go if they didn't agree to those terms?
No, I wouldn't have let him go alone. No, it's
too much.
It was a point where, the percentage was going to be greater for him to be more successful with a support staff there with him. And we can go through names, players that go over alone and, they come back. It's just difficult, and there were difficult times there where if he didn't have me there, things might be different right now. So,
the German league, from my understanding, talking to people, is probably one of the more sophisticated leagues in identifying players and putting a dollar value on that player. They do a lot of studies on it, and they try never to pay more than what they consider a player's value is. But they also look at the upside. Once the player reaches a certain value, they move that player on and regain a financial investment and profit to continue to develop players in the academy. So they put a lot of time and energy into identifying Christian and saying that he's the player we want without a trial, which is, this is really uncommon in professional sports. Usually you get a player like a Sanchez who's going to Manchester United because of what he's accomplished for many, many years. Christian was really just breaking in, wasn't he?
Yeah. He started playing U17, academy, and then fortunately, with his ability to have a European passport, he was able then to play games right away, which Jurgen Klopp at the time was the coach at Dortmund. So he would look over the fence and watch Christian training and invited him over as just turned 17 to train with the first team. So having him be able to play games and the European passport and was definitely helping the process. But he put in a lot of work. There were a lot of tough times during that first year, for sure.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a little bit. But while he's over there, and Mark has brought up something, having a European passport. Tell us how that comes around.
Well, my father is Croatian, so we were trying. Once we knew he wanted to go to Europe, we started the paperwork process. So, because my father still has property there, so we had an address, and we were able to get the ball rolling. But at the end of the day, to make a long story short, it wasn't really until Christian found success, and they saw his talent and his ability, that Dortmund then made calls over to Croatia and pushed the passport through. Right? So and how you do.
Yeah.
So it was going to be very difficult for him, because they said it could take 18 months to 5 years. So we were really stuck. We didn't really know. And then fortunately he showed well when he first went there, and the U17 coach went to the sporting director and said, "You got to get this kid's passport." So
Yeah, you're right. It's not only your abilities, but it's who you know
Yeah,
and how much
yeah.
they want you. So, oh, that's great. So now he's capable of playing, but he's also with the U.S. team. How was Dortmund's cooperation with that?
Well, that was one of the reasons why we also chose Dortmund, because we knew when Christian went over there, he wasn't going to be able to play any games. He'd only be able to play in friendlies and training. And if you're a kid, you want to play in a game. And if you're just training every day and there's nothing to look forward to besides a few tournaments or friendly matches, it's not exciting. So Dortmund, from the beginning, said, any USA tournament games we're gonna get them back for, because once you've signed with the club, they don't have to let you go unless it's senior national team. So you don't even have to allow your players to go to the U17 World Cup. So it's pretty strict. So that was one thing that they were very accommodating, and they wanted Christian to go back so he would have that gameplay. And since it was a World Cup for U17s, there was a lot of pre-tournaments and things to lead up to it. So that kind of satisfied his game need, I guess you would say, and to keep him excited to be training every day.
It really sounds like they were very concerned about Christian's welfare, and not only how he progressed as a player, but his mentality.
Yeah, for sure. They were very accommodating, and they saw something they liked, and they wanted to make sure he was getting games and competitive matches, and then everything took off once he got the passport, and he was playing in the Junior Bundesliga. They won the U17 championship, and he did very well, and then right to the first team.
I know, because of my grandson, it's not too easy going over there. He went at 15, but he went on his own. So he was living in a boarding home, and then he got his own apartment. But you were there with him. What was that life like? I would imagine it was wonderful, father-son time, wasn't it?
It was great. There were tough times, though. The first year was very difficult. The first 6 months going to a German school, they put him right into a German high school. And they had very little support. And it was almost how Dortmund did it, and they wanted him to do it. They wanted him to go be, immersed in the language. And but for a 15, 16-year-old kid, it was very challenging. And at times, he would wake up and, Dad, I don't want to go. So we would talk through a lot of things, give it another day, give it another week, and then he would get a little more comfortable with the language. And then it was a tough day, though. He was going to school from 8 to 2, would come home. Then he had German lessons at 4 for 2 hours, 4 to 6. That's a training that Dortmund provided for him. So, and then at 6 to 8, he would train, come home, have dinner, go to bed, and wake up. And so it was not the normal life of a teenage kid in high school. There's no, it was a sacrifice he was willing to make, and me being there obviously helped him get through a lot of those times. And that to me is really the difficult times. The first time you go overseas as a young player, you got to be able to stick it out and get through those first 6-8 months are the toughest times. So
that's a great point. We've all been in different places in the world, and you're there for 2 weeks. That first week really seems like it was fun. Then that second week starts to get old, doesn't it? And it gets, I can't wait to get back home. I'm sure there's a lot of times Christian, was wishing he was back home.
Yeah, I think one of his sacrifices was just giving up kind of his childhood, because he had to go and train every day hard because he wanted to be on the team. And there's probably 30 kids with his age group, and only 18 are going to dress, and only 11 are going to start. So he was really grinding away, and also trying to learn the language, and this is with not one friend, and that's one big thing that a lot of people don't look at, is he went over there and he didn't have a friendship for a while because he really couldn't communicate, and everybody wasn't quite comfortable with speaking English, and Christian didn't know enough German. So it was some challenging times, and I think that's one of the hardest parts for him, was just he really gave up a lot of his childhood of hanging with friends. driving around in a car.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And those friendships can be affected immediately because once he gets there and he's competing for a spot, he's got a lot of people that are fighting against him. I mean, they're not instant friends, are they? They're,
yeah.
You're here to take my place.
That's one of the things that, he'd call me and he's like, oh, they won't pass me the ball, Mom. They won't give me the ball. And I said, because they don't want you to take their spot. And that was really the truth. And it took some time for them even to give him the ball. And I was actually at a tournament, and it was friendly because he was able to play. And there was one opportunity where Christian beat a player, and he could have shot, but he played it back and gave someone, an open goal. And that's kind of like, that was the turnaround time when the players were like, all right, we'll accept this American kid. But before that, they wouldn't even pass him the ball. He could be standing there screaming, and they'd pass to anybody else. So it was
Sounds like a typical mom. Huh?
So
Don't pass my son the ball.
Yeah. We
true story though.
But it is.
Yeah. 2011, I believe it was, or 2012, I was managing the FC Dallas team, and we were in Sunshine in Fort Lauderdale area. And Don Garber made a big, strong statement to the managers in the room, and his statement was, when are we going to develop the first international star that's an American? And I still remember that comment because we all kind of looked at each other thinking, well, we got Landon Donovan. Because at that time, Landon Donovan was our star, wasn't he? And now we look at Christian as being the American star as an 18-year-old, an international level. And he's got so much more growth and so much more things that he can accomplish. So my question to you is this. Was Christian made in America, or was he made in Germany?
He was made in America, of course. That's where he developed all his technique, his skills, his skill set. But unfortunately, when you hit 15, and now you're trying, and you've become one of the top players, you need to be pushed. You need to be taken out of your comfort zone. You need a challenge. You can't be comfortable, and he knew that, and he wanted that challenge. And it's proof. He developed such a rapid pace from 16 to 19 that here, I don't want to say there's no way he would have. However, the challenges, there would have been many more challenges in this country.
So the level of competition, the demands every day, the demands of fighting for a top 18 and 11?
You stay, if he played in the U17, U19 DA, let's say, maybe he's the best player. He's always going to start. He's always the best player at training, although he's a hard worker, maybe he's not working hard every day at training, maybe he's not pushing himself. And there, if you don't, push yourself and every day, you're sacrificing your body, and the weather's bad, and you're getting hit from behind and slid. Guys are trying to take your spot, and you got to be at such a high level every day, or like she said, you might not get in the team, you might not get in the 18, you might not, so just a different mentality.
Yeah.
I do want to give my husband credit for something, though, because as he was growing up, Christian he's a tiny little thing, but my husband always put him in the right environment. So if he was 7 and he was the top player, he would move him up a level. So he was out of his comfort zone almost always. And then at times he had to go 2 years up until he got to be that 12, 13 where there's kids outweighing him 40 pounds where it became a dangerous issue. But my husband really watched his development closely and didn't have him in the team to be the best on the team or get the most goals or the most assists. He was always looking out for his development as a soccer player. So it wasn't about even the team winning at times. And I don't think a lot of people know that about my husband, knowing when it was right to move him up a level, 2 levels, move him back down because of size. And that was for Christian fighting for being a starter on whichever team he was on. So I do want to add that and give my husband a little credit.
Yeah, we want instant success sometimes, and we always, there's a tendency to think if I move my son or my daughter up and play against higher competition, that it will bring more out of them. But sometimes it can be dangerous, and psychologically it can be defeating. You lose your confidence and so many other things that can be going on. What does Christian do that's special? And then I'm going to ask you, well, maybe I should ask you that question. What do you think he does special? Then maybe ask you, what did Dortmund think that he does that is special?
Well, to me, his personality is, the way, just as a kid, as my son, he's a good kid, like people like him, his teammates, he respects elders, his coaches, so I think that that's the most important thing that, we instilled in him is, to be a good person, and, even when he's doing interviews and, he's a pretty humble kid, and he knows he hasn't arrived anywhere yet at 19. So he has a lot of room to grow and improve. So I think maybe I stole your thunder. I just think from a person standpoint, that's I think what we're most proud of. So Dortmund, as far as what they saw was special, is just his attacking abilities. His speed with the ball. They just instantly, wanted to continue to develop and saw there's so much potential there.
I know in the German league, everything is very, very counter, stopping the counter. Yeah. Did Christian make some adjustments on his defending?
Yeah, he always, attackers don't like to defend, but he didn't really have a choice, Yeah. So, he learned a pressing system there because they really press a lot. I think this past coach now, they've had 3 coaches now in the past few months, so it's a little less pressing, but, he knew when the ball turns over, he's got to come back and, because they would break the press, and so he worked hard and, he learned how to defend for sure.
And we see what Liverpool does, right? With Klopp, they came out pressing. I think continue
Heavy
to press
metal.
more than that first year that he's ever in his whole life.
Yeah, for
but,
sure.
What's special with Christian?
I don't want to repeat what my husband says, but in the end, because we always say soccer is like 5 minutes of your life. So, in reality. So we just hope that he continues to be a good person because he really is a good person. He loves his family. And, he's good to his sister and brother. And that's really what's most important. And, he never forgets to call for a birthday. He's so excited. He called his grandmother. So he's a good kid. That's from his mom, though.
What hurts you the most that he's over there? As a parent, Kelly, what hurts the most?
When my husband and Christian left, Christian was only 15, going on 16. That was probably the hardest day because I felt like my life was goodbyes. It was just like goodbye. And then, I'd only see him twice a year for about 3.5 weeks. So that was the hardest part, is just losing that. Thank God for FaceTime, so we used to FaceTime, but I have to hurry up and get home from work because of the 6-hour difference. But that was probably the hardest, just as a family, you lost that. But because of FaceTime, we did, stay as close as we could.
You're able to stay in contact. I just don't think enough of us understand the sacrifices that the parents go through as well. This is an all-in decision, and as much as you hurt being away, he hurts not being with you. So he has to be a good kid to survive this environment. What hurt you the most?
I think we were there the first 6 months where he was struggling at times with the language and the schooling, and there were a lot of tears. He's an emotional kid, so I would say we would set little goals. Let's give it another 3 months. We can't. I promised him after 6 months it would be much easier and more comfortable. Thank God it happened. So we I was there, and that for me hurt. When you see your kid hurting, we would have conversations for hours. Are we crazy? What are we doing? Is this the right thing? But Christian never wanted to leave, because we would, okay, if you really want to, but he always wanted to stick it out. So.
And you're glad he did.
I'm glad he did.
Yeah, there you go.
He's glad he did.
Yes, he's glad he did. You brought up language a couple times, and I may be reading this wrong, or someone else. Did he just recently buy his German instructor a gift? Did that happen recently?
They were together. They just had, there was
Yeah, he's kept in touch with her, and they just did a big interview, big TV kind of interview, and she surprised him, and she was a big influence on him, helping him to learn the language, and it was a lot of people. That was a massive support system to help him.
Yeah, I would imagine that was really thrilling for that instructor as well, that somebody remembers you.
Yes.
So I
sure.
think that's another statement to the quality of a person that Christian is. Mm-hmm. So we get ourselves now to qualifying for the U.S., for the World Cup, for Russia. I mentioned earlier I had an interview with Soccer America. They were talking about the transition from MLS to college and so forth. And then they asked me one question I wasn't ready for. And that question was, what do you think of the U.S. national team? And I've been around enough not to answer that question. So I said, I think there's a problem, but I don't know what it is, but I'm scared that we're putting all our hopes on an 18-year-old's shoulder, because I saw the development in Christian, and I saw how effective he was and how important he was to the team. And the article didn't come out, but the Panama game came. And if you remember the Panama game against the U.S., I mean, Christian was unbelievable. He didn't play like an 18-year-old. He controlled the game. He scored. He created opportunities and assists. And I felt like, Charles, you're a damn fool. We can put all our hopes on this 18-year-old shoulders. And of course, it wasn't long after that we didn't qualify with Trinidad. How devastating was that for him?
I don't even think my husband can talk about it. The two of us woke up in the middle of the night, like every hour, because we were gutted because of talking to Christian afterwards. And some of you in the room know Christian, and Christian's personality is very strong. So when Christian isn't successful at a ping pong game with his dad and he loses, he's mad. So you can imagine his life of wanting to be, I know he's young, but that's all he wanted, is to go to the World Cup. So gutted is not even a word of explaining how he felt. And then as parents, when your kids hurt, you hurt. And if anyone's parents, you know what it feels like when they get hurt. Well, this is a hurt we couldn't fix. Can't even talk about it.
Yeah. It was tough. It was a tough night on the phone with him. Yeah, I mean, he was emotional. He didn't know really where he wanted to go. Did he want to go back to Germany? It was just a tough 24 hours. But, and that's one thing I think for me that impresses me not lately at that time, what he did was he went right back to Germany, and he didn't let it affect him so much. He knew he had to go right back and fight for his next starting, spot, and, it was just a tough, yeah. I get frustrated talking about it. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to stay with us for a while, all of us. And it's probably going to come up again when we watch the games on TV.
Yeah.
One of the things that happens when you sign a professional contract, you basically are the property of that club. And they've had some managers changes. Not every manager change is for a benefit, but a manager leaves, you replace them, It's not quite the way you thought it was, so you make another change, and pretty soon, you got a manager that maybe doesn't seem the same qualities as the previous manager has. How does Christian adjusted with the changes? And I understand that's a tough question to answer because you never want this to get out. So say it in a polite way.
It's been a tough year here for Dortmund. They've changed some managers, but for a young player, I think it's a good thing. I think he's always has to now reprove himself, and so I think he took it as a challenge. And fortunately, the coaches all kind of see the same thing, and they've given him a good opportunity to play. But you're right; it could have went another way. So. But I think, like I said, I think any time you're taken now, a coach likes you. He had Klopp, then Tuchel loved him, and then now there's a new coach, and he's got to go now reprove himself, and it's just being taken out of your comfort zone, just as he did when he went to Germany. I mean, that's how you develop. You're taking out of what feels comfortable to you, and now you have to go into an environment that is very challenging, and you have to again prove yourself.
And the managers have to win today. They're not giving a long lease of developing the team. And I would imagine the majority of managers are going to go with established players, older players, players that they can count on to keep their position. So Christian is always trying to prove himself again, that I'm worthy to be here. And I'm not only worthy to be here, but I should be a top 11. But because of his success and because of the missed opportunity to the World Cup, he's still on radar right now, isn't he? I mean, there's clubs that are talking about him. Not any club in particular we want to mention, but there's interest for people to buy in him for a contract.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you like me to move on?
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't stay at one club forever nowadays. It's, Messi is probably one of that you can say has, but we'll see where it goes. He's very comfortable there right now. There's a lot of things that can happen over the next 2 weeks and over the next summer or beyond. So right now he's totally focused. He has a game tomorrow in Berlin, and so he's staying put for now.
But you guys are on Twitter and all at a one football world and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's. Yeah.
We enjoy the rumors because we even get like texts from our family members. I got a text from his brother. Is he going to Man United? And I was like, stop reading the nonsense. But I guess it's nice to be wanted.
That's it. It's nice to be wanted instead of being let go. So he's.
Could be worse.
Yeah. We're so proud of him, for what he's accomplished, and also so proud of you guys, because this is, how difficult it is firsthand to find success here. Do you take phone calls from parents asking you, how did you do this, and what obstacles got in your way?
I talked to a parent last week, a friend of a friend, sent him, and I said, oh yeah, I have some time. So she was planning on taking her son next year overseas, and I talked to her about 20 minutes, and I told her, I said, well, don't think you're just going to go over there and get this big contract. Like, you need to make sure it's reality. And I told her about the, learning German and having no friends and not, being able to do what high school kids do, because that's what Christian will tell me. I look at my friends and they're just worried about the next party, at college this weekend, and I got to go to work. So. So I do talk to parents and try to explain to them that there's a lot more to it than just going over there and, oh, you're a pro. It's a lot more than that.
I think what we like to do now is open it up for questions and answers. All right? I've had a lot of conversation with them. What I'd like to do now is give them an opportunity to answer some of your questions. So what I'm going to do is you just raise your hand, and I'm going to come out there and just give you the microphone, and then we'll move from there.
Great job so far, really informative. And I'm Canadian, and I can say that already, I don't want to jinx him, but he's the best player that's come out of the U.S. or Canada ever. So I hope it continues. I have a few questions. You're obviously a coach. Did you do a lot of one-on-one with him growing up?
Not more than any other father who played the game would. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we played other sports, and I wouldn't have set times where we'd go train. You know, it was just him playing and I going out, and a lot of times I was just the goalie, and he'd be shooting on me. So just like any dad, but of course I would help him a little bit if there was some technique things I would show him, and so yeah.
Sorry, social pressures, like before even went over, like this is I guess a little bit deeper, but for his personality, was it tough for him, like knowing that when he went over, like did he like to go to parties and all that? Was that a thing that he struggled with?
Christian wanted to play soccer and be a pro when he was 5. So he knew what he was going into. So socially, no, I don't think it really was an issue for him. I think he just, I mean, even now, he'll say, oh, my friends, you know, they're just worried about that when I have to, you know, worried about playing against Real Madrid in the Champions League, you know, so he's like just different pressures. So, but he said, I can't really complain. I'm going to play against Real Madrid.
But I mean, even before that point, like when he, like at 14, 15, because, you know, when he got to the national team.
No, Christian's very much into his sport and loves his sport more than he loves probably anything else.
And my last question is, how were you with him as a kid growing? I know you talked about pushing him up to play a year up to 2 years up to challenge him. In terms of if he had a bad game, good game, how were you as a sport? Because I'm always interested. I sent actually a kid to Germany recently. He's on trial there. And I look at different players from their family backgrounds, and some have great confidence, so they go into a new environment, they can handle it. Some don't. So I'm always interested to hear, you know, were you tough on him? Hey, you didn't play well today, or you know, what was your kind of role with that?
Yeah, I mean, we like we said, we had to pick the right time to go. We knew he had the mentality, and yeah.
After the game, how did you treat him? He's asking you. Here.
Oh, no. I was his coach a lot, but I would never, after a game, say anything negative, or I wouldn't even talk about the game, because he already had it in his head. If he had a bad game, he didn't want to talk to you. He's just very driven. So I would never put any pressure on him. You know, the worst thing a parent can do is after a game in a car, talk to their kid about the game in a negative way. You know, you might as well, the kids, you know, why is he going to want to go to practice the next day? Why is he going to want to drive in a car, you know, the next day? So I was very conscious of that and just was very positive with him.
Questions? If you would introduce yourself.
I'm Justin Meehan. Unfortunately, I had the chance to coach against you and your son at PA Classics tournament a bunch of years ago. Didn't go well for us, but and you could tell that like all the things you said are absolutely true. But as the U.S. didn't qualify for the World Cup, and as a lot of the interviews and stuff have rolled around, like the ESPN one that came out last week, how do you guys deal with like being here and he's in Germany? How do you guys deal with seeing all the media attention that he gets? How is that as a parent?
Oh, I think we're very proud. I mean, you know, we love seeing him doing interviews. I mean, just as anyone would their kids, you know. Go ahead, did you want to add?
Yeah, even when the one comment that keeps sticking out in my head is how it seemed like it was so painful for him to say like that they weren't going, and it seemed like he really like genuinely was distraught about them not being.
He was just, yeah.
And my question is really like, you're here seeing and listening to people go on rants about how this was a disaster and all these things. Yeah. How is that for you guys versus he's in Germany, kind of displaced and doesn't see it as much?
Well, for me, it's very difficult because I see how it could have been different, and they could have qualified. You know, so that's the most frustrating thing for me. And then when I see his pain, that hurts me beyond belief. When he's doing an interview saying how gutted he is, they keep showing a picture of him crying after the Trinidad game. I can't even look at that. I get sick. So I'm very emotional in that regard. I'll stop now.
But to add to that, I think the media, like every day, you can read lots of different stories. So I think we're learning to turn it off, and Christian is as well, because believe me, he sees everything. But just getting a little bit better about just turning it off, not reading it. Or if you're going to read it, you got to read the good with the bad, and then just keep smiling afterwards. So that's kind of one thing that we keep teaching ourselves, because this is obviously pretty new for us to learn. So we're learning as we go.
Yeah. Garrett Eldridge, actually, you coached me at Classics under Steve Klein as well. So just Christian talked a little bit about the time frame of being like 16 to 18 and that being like a little bit of a sweet spot for him in terms of his development. For you, obviously being a coach in the academy, how much validity do you give to that specific time frame, and do you think that we're doing enough in that time frame to develop kids here?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's such a critical time. I mean, obviously he said that because he's always heard me talk about those, and I always told him, those are the critical times, and he saw it when he went over to Germany, how much passion and these guys trying to, that age, they're trying to get a contract to live their dream, so, are we doing enough here? I'm not going to say we're not doing enough. I mean, U.S. Soccer's trying so hard to with these developmental academies and trying to, make games as competitive as possible. And it's just the culture is not going to lend itself for those age groups for players to develop. It's just, even when I was coaching U16 and 18 academy, kids are still, hey, I have to miss practice for this. I have to miss practice for this. I have to, can I still play basketball? I can't play soccer in high school, but can I still play, you don't have those decisions to be made over there. You just can't. You're there to play, you know where I'm going with this. So those ages are so critical.
This is more for Mark. I'm Andre Watson from Chicago. After watching Christian's development in the U.S. and then going over to Germany and seeing what the culture is like in Germany as far as soccer, and you're talking about culture. If you were president for a day for U.S. Soccer, what would you change to create better players in the U.S.? I mean, it could be on a little scale for,
We need better coaches. Leave it at that. And I'm probably going to regret saying that. But we need coaches that are held accountable.
Hi, I'm Ray Salvador from New York City. I had a couple of questions in regards to Christian's development. We talked about I heard PA Classics. Before he went to Dortmund, we had a player that came through my club that just got called in to the England 21s. He was a English citizen as well. And when he played for us, he had an opportunity. Well, my club's not in the development academy. Mm-hmm. He had a chance to go to the development academy, and he's a very good attacking player. We knew it. We saw it all the time. And that's where he was going to be placed if he went to that development academy. But he decided that he wanted to stay with our club, and we had him playing more in a 6 role, in an 8 role. Mm-hmm. And it really kind of developed his entire game, his passing ability, his transition game, etc. Did Christian play other positions while he was at PA Classics prior going in there? Did he play like a 6? Did he play an 8? Did he play, or was it always primarily attacking roles?
No, once he lends himself. He's always, even since he was small, he just always wanted to go score goals, and so players kind of develop positionally, I think, as they grow, right. And he just always was more comfortable in that role as an attacking player from a young age. So even at PA Classics, he would never drop back too far, maybe once in a while, but he would always be the front 3, or number 10, you know. So it was more as an attacking player.
Right. And being where you were located, right, you probably
Yeah.
had other opportunities to play at other DA clubs, maybe MLS clubs in the
Yeah.
area.
Of course,
Was that, but I'm kind of referring to an article, I think that was written a while back, how you enjoyed having him play at PA Classics, being with his home club, feeling that it brought out more of his game, that he had to carry more of the load.
Yes,
saw
that's
that?
true. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Philly Union, he could have went there, and you know, some other opportunities. But we played him 2 years up, you know, and the level of players at that time were very good, and the training sessions were very competitive, and he had to work extremely hard, and he's a very committed person to his club. He loved the club, and that's where we saw him developing best.
Thanks.
Final questions?
Go ahead.
No, here you go. So everybody can hear.
You coached youth at Dortmund. What age, Mark?
I was working with all the ages, U9 to U19. We were doing small group sessions, and I did a lot of work with all the coaches there.
What were the similarities and differences between those players and the players that you see here, and also their parents?
Just briefly, because I know there's a couple more questions that people want to get to, and we're running out of time. I think the players, we had to always tame the players back physically. They were trained so hard, even at U9. They were so committed, such, you know, whereas here it's almost the opposite way. You know, you got to push them to be more competitive at younger ages. And sorry, what was the last question? Oh, yeah, there's no parent involvement at all. Yeah, they can watch from the side, and but once they open their mouth or anything negative, they're taken off the grounds right away.
Hi, my name is Nicole Hercules. I'm from Rochester, New York, and I just want to thank you for your work with the Rhinos. And my next question is, are you coming back? We need you back. I'm over here.
Yeah, see straight
We need you back in Rochester.
No, I'm heading to Pittsburgh in the USL now. Got a new
That was
gig.
a quick question. Go ahead, Coach.
I enjoyed my year in Rochester, though. It was a great city.
Hi guys, Josh Groves, New Mexico now. Couple of questions. You had mentioned that Christian had some opportunities when he was about 10 to go and spend a week or a few days in Europe. Clearly he wasn't playing for the national team at that point. How did those opportunities come about?
Just through my contacts. I mean, I played, you know, I have contacts all over. You know, he went to Barcelona for a few years at 10, 11, 12, because I had actually a family friend who was best friends with Pep Guardiola at the time. So we got him to be training with the U10s and U11s at that point. So that's really was his first experience going overseas. And then there were a few other opportunities we had just through contacts, coaches.
Thanks. And then just a follow-up, you mentioned he played other sports as a child. At what point did he quit those other sports and specialize with soccer?
He didn't ever really, he played basketball, but competitive, that was about it. But he only wanted to play soccer competitively. He would play everything else, just, you know, with the neighborhood kids, have friends over and stuff. Loved golf, but he never really wanted to be on more of a competitive team besides like a rec basketball team. And so he chose that himself. We tried to have him keep going, but he just wanted soccer.
13-ish, he went all soccer.
Well, I think as we finish up, Kelly, Mark, thank you so much. Give them a big hand, would you please? Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for developing Christian the way you have as parents. I think we all can say we've all been around good players, but not all of them are great people. And it's everything I know of Christian, you've got a great young man there, so we thank you for that. And we are, all of us, are keeping our fingers crossed for the next World Cup and his continued success. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.